Right, I think we might get going and others can join us as we go. I appreciate everyone's time is very precious. So first of all, can I welcome you and thank you for joining me today. For those of you that I haven't met and haven't seen in any of the forums we've been putting together earlier on in lockdown, I'm Alison Hargreaves. I've been running Guides for Brides for the last 25 years. We actually celebrated our 25th anniversary a couple of weeks into lockdown. So I am absolutely with everyone on this journey, really wanting to make sure we get as many of the venues that we've been working with for so many years through this and to the other end. Obviously, this couldn't be better timing. Friday's news was yet another huge blow, and absolutely my heart goes out to the venues that were gearing up and were ready for those weddings at the weekend, and all of those couples and those with hopes for next weekend. I know it's opened yet another series of questions on what happens with those prepayments and all of those costs that went into getting things ready for the weekend. So hopefully today we can start giving a little bit more information that might help you with those decisions. The guidance has been updated again today. There's some very, very minor changes, but at least it has now for the first time since the 17th been properly updated. The main things are acknowledging the fact nothing's going to change before the 15th of August, so no receptions at all before the 15th of August. The third-party caterers have now been included in those numbers, so that's quite a big help for a lot of venues. The word should has been removed in various places, so putting a lot more emphasis. We're aware that some local authorities have got a very different interpretation to the rest of the country on whether these weddings should be allowed to go ahead. So some slightly stronger language on that now. And obviously the use of face coverings from the 8th, which will be required by law. The intention of this session is not to discuss contractual law. That's not what we're about. Right from the beginning, what we're about is gathering the information that is out there from as many sources as possible to give you as much information as we can to combine with all of the other sources of information that is out there so that you can make the right decision for your venue. We're not saying there's a right and wrong decision. I think all of the questions and the forums have made it really clear that there's not a clear-cut answer. That's why the CMA are struggling with it. That's why so many brides and grooms and venues and suppliers are asking questions. There's not a clear-cut answer. No one's going to know what the answers are until there's been test cases, and by then the damage has been done. We have been right from the beginning about helping venues and suppliers protect their revenue and their reputation and trying to get that balance right. So it's very much about looking at that, looking at how different venues have been dealing with things and therefore what the possible solutions are. We've got the chat there, so if you've got any questions as we go through, do feel free to pop them in the chat. We are wanting a little bit of interactivity. We've not muted people's microphones, but if I can ask you just to sort of keep on mute while we go through the presentation, and then by all means we can have a little bit more of a conversation, or just Nina and I can work through the bits in chat. I am recording the session just because there were quite a few venues that messaged me this morning and said any chance of recording it so that they can have a look at it afterwards. So do feel free to change your name if you're not wanting to be appearing on there. I have got Nina Beer joining me today, so thank you very much indeed, Nina, for being with me. Nina is coming at this and has been very, very helpful for me to be speaking to over the last few weeks. She consults for quite a few venues. She works as an on-the-day planner in quite a few venues, so she really sees the perspective far more from the venue side. But quite importantly, she works with a lot of couples, and very early on in lockdown, she set up the Facebook group plan to propose, which gave a forum for couples to talk on. And that has been very, very helpful for us to just gauge the temperature and to understand what couples are talking about, what's going on, and how they are perceiving things are happening. So Nina is here as well to answer any questions. So I think what we will do is I'm going to just run through the results of the survey so you can see what it is that we have been looking at. So hopefully you can see my screen okay there. So this is looking very much at the venues and couples views on postponement. So it was 2 surveys that went out last week. So this is very up-to-date information, but doesn't take into consideration that change on Friday. It was shared via quite a few different platforms so that we could get a really good perspective. We didn't want it just to be the venues that advertise on Guides for Brides. We also have a little bit of additional data from a survey that we sent out at the beginning of April to venues, which was sent to the CMA and to the government, just highlighting a lot of the issues venues were going to be encountering. So there we go. So this has been largely from, so this is the venues that were answering the survey. It is a mix of large venue groups, small venue groups, and individual venues. So postponement policy based primarily on, this was the perspective from the point of view of the venue, what it was that they were using to form the basis of their policy. And you can see it's a little bit different between them. Small venue groups needing to look after their business slightly more than just looking after the needs of the couples and protecting their business. What's quite interesting here is when you then start to compare the perception of couples versus the perception of venues. So you can see here on the left, this is the overall percentage, a very, very tiny fraction of venues felt that their postponement policy was about looking after themselves. A lot of couples felt that what the venues were doing were trying to look after themselves. So that is just something just to be aware of, have it in the back of your mind, that brides are seeing it in a slightly different way than venues. Again, we've got a little bit of an anomaly here. So this is the reason we felt that this session was going to be so useful, is when you look at how different types of venues are using the contract versus just common sense or making things work with their couples, there's quite a big anomaly. And again, it's the small venue groups that are enforcing the terms of their contracts, and perhaps explains where the pattern of negative press on social media has been coming from. So again, this is something just to be aware of. It's quite interesting from the point of view of the individual venues, not knowing whether the contract was enforceable. And, you know, we absolutely applaud the work that's going on at the moment. I know there is a group that's looking at just seeing if they can get a clearer contract going forward so that venues can sign up to a much, much clearer template and everyone knows where they stand. Would have been much, much easier going through this. So we then looked at, for cancellations, what venues and couples felt was reasonable to retain. So this is from the point of view of venues, what they were feeling under different circumstances was reasonable to retain. I will share these with everyone afterwards. So you can see the bit that we're very interested in is in that 0%. And this is cancellation. This, you know, it surprised us, in fact, how generous people are being over cancellations. From the bride's point of view and the groom's point of view, this is their expectation. So that is very, very different. And you can see where the problems are starting to be, particularly then they don't seem to have that sympathy with the venue when it is the venue that's needing to cancel. So, venue at the last minute, this was the situation we were facing on Friday, that's, almost 70%. We're expecting all their money back if the venue had to cancel on Friday. This is extra charges for postponements from any date. Now, we have been very, very keen to be encouraging postponements over cancellation. That's been our message right from the beginning. And again, couples are expecting to be able to postpone for free. That very last column, again, quite interesting, that different perspective coming out for, this is price caps for 2022 and beyond. A surprising number of couples are expecting to pay this year's prices in 2022. So quite important that we are helping to educate them on that one. And this is couples' perspective on it. Again, a little bit different, but not vastly, a little bit more expecting, those 100% cancellations for postponing to low season dates. You'll see though, right the way across, almost all of that is either free or 10% that couples are expecting. They're not expecting the world here on postponements. The complaints that are reaching us certainly are the ones that are being asked to pay 50%, 60%, 70% more, running into the sort of several thousands more. That seems to be where the complaints are coming from. This was, again, there was a little bit of a shift in perception here. So we asked about prepayments. We asked venues how prepayments were being handled, and we asked couples how they felt their prepayments were being cancelled, and there was an anomaly. So most venues felt that they weren't charging couples according to the original date if the wedding had been postponed, but 15% of couples felt they were. Again, on moving payments to the new date, 78% of venues felt that's what they were doing, but only 45% of couples felt that their dates had moved. Now, it may be that there's an anomaly in the data. It may be that a lot of the venues that are perhaps not moving to the new date aren't included within this data set, and the couples that had completed the survey were perhaps the ones that were more likely to have had issues. But quite interesting that difference in perception there. So, but generally the feeling does seem to be, for anyone that's not sure on that one, we've been encouraging couples that the norm seems to be that you move all of the remaining payments to the new date. But I know it has been something that venues and couples have found has been a brilliant point of negotiation, that if the couple is wanting to move to that Saturday or to whatever the key date is, then if they make their final payment now, then that would cover it. This may be something the CMA get involved in, just possibly. There's been some hint that prepayments is going to be something they are looking at. The situation at the moment, obviously receptions can't go ahead at all. What we were aware of last week, which was really, really alarming, was that pubs, and I apologise if there's pubs and restaurants, I know quite a few of our clients are pubs and restaurants, but pubs and restaurants, we're aware, were actively targeting couples who had got ceremonies now in order to get them to move their wedding reception into a pub and restaurant. They've got so many advantages over wedding venues at the moment, not least on Friday when everything was cancelled, when all of the venues, the pure wedding venues, were having to just waste all of that food. All the pubs and restaurants were just able to advertise specials, and they even had a lovely data set of all of those people that have been filling in their phone numbers for contact tracers to contact and know about the specials. So this has, for us, it's not the worst news in the world that the government had just put a little bit of a hold on these small receptions. It's also meant that the that social media has not been flooded with images of couples having an amazing time for almost no money in pubs and restaurants. That would not have been that helpful to our industry. So it's great that 65%, it was matched. That was brides and businesses. 65% would rather their weddings were postponed rather than going ahead. This was from the survey back in April. We didn't look at the financial impact of 30 guests. We looked at 10, 20 and 50. We had no idea that this number of 30 would be apparently plucked out of the air. But even with 50 guests or less, it's only 28% of venues could run at a profit. And we had concerns earlier on in the year that exactly what is happening now might happen, that venues would be forced to or obliged to open with small numbers, with couples not willing to pay to have an almost empty venue. You are having to maintain your grounds in order to accommodate these weddings. And this was what that was based on. So, you know, our understanding is it needs to be those larger receptions once they are safe to go ahead. And they need to be more along the restaurant guidelines, so that with normal social distancing, and at that point far more could be profitable. It made a staggering difference just being able to change to those normal restaurant social distancing guidelines. So at the moment, you know, this opening at 30 really isn't good news if even at 50 only 28% can be profitable. Policy for reduced numbers, the expectations, again, there was a little bit of a difference between venues and couples. These are the results from venues, but there's a note there on what couples were saying. So 21% of couples perceived that their venue was asking them to pay exactly the same, even though it was only 30 guests. And only 20% of couples felt that cost had been reduced accordingly. Equal number feeling it's sensible to split the wedding events, and the majority, again, wanting to postpone. The CMA had been asking very early on about prepayment. So, I mean, as it is, the industry are slightly holding the power on this one, in that we are very much saying to the government that the government needs to help the wedding industry, because we have a huge amount of consumer deposits and prepayments with suppliers and with venues at the moment. And they know that they need to support us so that those consumers don't lose their money. It does put us in quite a powerful position, but it's a position they don't want to be in the future. We are trying to encourage a little bit of a code of practice. We were delighted at the number, particularly that number of individual venues that already hold money in a client account and protect those deposits. If we can, and this is the sort of data that may stop us needing to be regulated, if we can say, actually, we're already doing that, we're already protecting these couples. Again, there's a little bit of an anomaly there. The small venue groups were the group that weren't that keen to be putting money into a client account. So these are going to be the ones that may be affected. So these are the ones that we really need to try and sort of fight hard on. And totally understandable with the individual venues. We need that cash flow to improve before we can put this money into a client account rather than be using it as working capital. So free cancellation postponement policy, you may be aware very early on we launched Book with Confidence. That's now being used by a lot of airlines and other businesses, a lot of the sort of holiday businesses that were just needing to get that consumer confidence back. We were very interested in the huge number of businesses that would be able to offer that. So that's particularly during COVID and during a time where couples can't get insurance, to know that if things change, they would be able to cancel or postpone. This isn't about, you know, them switching payments around. No one in their right mind would pay, you know, potentially thousands of pounds to a business at the moment without genuinely intending to go ahead with the booking. But this is saying, you know, trust us, we're going to be here, we're going to look after your deposit. And if you need to make changes, particularly because of COVID, then, you know, you can do that. So we were, you know, amazed at how many are able to do that. It's not something, you know, I'm sure this isn't going to be something that would ever become any sort of, you know, accepted practice in the long term, but it's certainly something we will be working on within Guides for Brides as just a, you know, a code of practice for those that would like to sign up to give those couples a little bit more confidence. We have been banging on for some time to the government, and there's been some fantastic campaigns led by Love My Dress and Nina from Occasion Queens and various others. Sarah Hayward is very, very active on this one. I know the ABWB have been talking to the government as well, and trying to get some sort of financial package. It's all about bridging us to next year. We know those weddings are there. We know those weddings want to take place, but we need to make sure that we're there. And we were very, very keen to just find out from all of you what would be most helpful. And what won't be a surprise at all is just from the conversations we've had with suppliers, they are on the absolute opposite side of the coin on this. They're looking for extensions to the self-employment income scheme, and they're looking for interest-free loans. They can't use furlough extension, they can't use furlough at all. They're needing to be there for their couples at the moment. They are the only person there communicating with them, and a lot of them aren't that registered. There are various other schemes being talked about. We were just interested in these four sort of main ones in particular. Not very cheery news here. This was looking from the point of view of couples, how likely they felt it was if their wedding is still on the books for 2020. Now, this was before that final nail in the coffin on Friday, how likely they felt it was going to be going ahead. They are not optimistic. I mean, this is great that they're still sticking with things, but I think we need to be aware of just how anxious they are. And our survey for couples last month was showing that 87% were suffering significant levels of anxiety, very specifically over whether or not their wedding can go ahead. So, and this is 4% are saying it's very unlikely that they'd have to postpone. Sorry, I've just realised this is, I do apologise, I've just realised this is reversed. It's likelihood of the wedding being able to go ahead, not having to cancel. I will correct it on this slide before we send this slide out. So what we were able to summarise from this, I touched on the fact there's a little bit of an anomaly between the data sets on those slides that we were comparing. It is probably that the frustrated couples are speaking up more, but it is quite likely there is that difference in perception. 65% don't support the 30-person solution. Additional data supports a 70% capacity. So this is the point at which more than half of venues can break even. When you look in detail on the postponement data, it was in fact 90% was supporting free postponements with minimal restrictions. So that was things like moving it to off-peak, or moving it to anything but a Saturday, or moving it to anything up till the 31st of March next year. So generally, if your venue isn't supporting that, be aware that your couples will be talking to other couples in the forums, comparing notes, and the chances are for every bride saying, my venue is going to charge me to move to an off-peak date, there will be 9 brides saying, well, mine hasn't. So just be aware of that. It needs to be an individual decision, but just be aware. We then have 75% supporting free postponement to any date. We know that issue over Saturdays and totally understand that. And I don't think anyone is really expecting expecting venues to be giving up that valuable Saturday next year when you need that additional income from those new bookings. And we know those new bookings are there. We're speaking to a lot of new brides coming on. But if it could be, for example, a 15% price cap, if across the industry we could agree on a 15% price cap, that's 94% of couples feel that is the maximum. They would like it to be free, but 94% would support that, and 86% of venues would support that. So that is the sort of thing that could be incredibly easy to do. Most, as we said, support postponement payments being according to the new date. 75% could hold funds in a client account. So that is something, again, could be a very, very sensible thing for venues to be letting brides know. If you are doing that, let them know. And then the free cancellations and postponements on new bookings. And as I mentioned, the suppliers are looking for different support. And I think it's very, very easy for us when we're looking at this to be thinking about, inevitably, venues, it's 45% of the overall spend on the average wedding goes on the venue and the caterer. And so it is the most important part of it from the point of view of the financial side of it. That does make up the biggest part. Certainly from our point of view as a business, it's the most important sector from our point of view, but we have to remember that 55% is all of these other suppliers. So one of the things we're trying to do is just keep an eye that the policies like opening up for 30 people can include those suppliers, and there's not a risk that everyone else is cut out just to save one sector, that we're throwing absolutely everyone under the bus. So that's very much where we're coming from, trying to give everyone the full picture, trying to give couples as much confidence as we can, and trying to make sure everyone has got as much information as possible. Now, I can see one question there. If there are other questions, do pop them in there. What I might just, so Magdalena is asking, new guidance reception is allowed for up to 2 households indoors. I'm assuming you are speaking about weddings in England. So yes, I believe it is just under normal social distancing. It can't be a reception though. So it's still no receptions, nothing that would be considered a reception, or they are strongly advised against, I think is the wording at the moment. Nina may be able to correct me on that one. But yes, 2 households indoors is absolutely fine if your license allows for it. So obviously some venues don't have the license that would permit that. What I might do is, if you have any other questions, do just pop them in the chat there. But otherwise, I will just hand over to Nina, and perhaps Nina can just fill us in on any areas that I've not covered there.
Thanks, Alison. Hello, everybody. I thought I'd just give you a little introduction as to who I am, what I do, and how, if you've got any questions, that I might be able to help with, and happy to do so. So I've worked in the events industry at large for 17 years and the wedding industry for 5 years. I consult for venues, I run their events, I specialise in on-the-day coordination for couples, so they can obviously contact me directly and do that. So I work all over, and I work in a variety of venues as well. So pubs, barns, high-end hotels, wherever that might be. Before lockdown, I started Plan to Postpone, which is a Facebook group with over 800 couples in, not suppliers, just so I could be there to support people. My business very much caters for couples who can't afford or don't want a full wedding planner, and I knew that all those people would need support. So it's turned into this huge therapy group, and it's also meant that I have helped hundreds of couples now with their postponement. And I suppose my big message coming off of the back of what Alison has said is that if your postponement policy is seen to be as fair as possible, giving them as many options as possible that work for you, makes them feel in control of their day. And if you can give couples back some degree of control over what they can do, you are absolutely onto a winner. And what we're seeing now is that for the venues who are asking couples to just hang on, keep on hanging on, we're going to make you hang on right up until 6 weeks before, 8 weeks before, what we're seeing is that the impact to them and their mental health is so huge now that they're cancelling. They're done. They really are sick of hanging on. So just thinking about your postponement policies and where you're at, and as Alison has said, this has to be individual. You know your bank balance and where you stand. But if you are in a position to be able to postpone your couples and give them the choice, many might turn around and say they want to hang on, but if you're able to give them that choice, then you might find that you get less cancellations in the long run. So that would be my overarching message to everyone at the moment as to kind of where we're at temperature-wise with couples. So I think a few questions have just popped up, so I don't know if you want to run through those. Of Jan to March and further, so we're looking at what is the consensus of Jan to March and further weddings also being postponed. So in terms, and I'll come from this purely from a couple point of view, if you want venue specific or anything on guidelines, then do shout. I will come from couples at this point. I've been hearing this morning actually of March couples postponing to later in the year or to 2022, which I could see coming probably about a month ago. And I can see it happening more and more the more we realise that normality is not going to be returned. And I tell you now, the big thing that people want is dancing. It's that celebration aspect. And this is the sticking point. This is really what's going to cripple us, I think. If we can get through that and come up with some amazing ways of getting around and the dancing part, then I think we'll be okay. Also, the longer that couples are living with this new normal, they might come next year come to some conclusion that they're going to have to skip that part, okay. But I think it's happening. I think more and more people are coming aware. I, for example, haven't let anyone who's got a wedding in 2021 into plan to postpone, because I don't feel it's fair on the 2020 couples who are still struggling to start hearing about it. You know, they consider 2021 people lucky. But I've probably got, I would say, 35 requests at the moment to join the group from 2021 couples saying they want help with postponements. So the appetite's there for it. Next question. We are thinking of stopping viewings for 2022 as we have our doubts about 2021. I don't blame you. It's a very individual stance to come from that one. And again, you know your bank balance. But it's going to be very difficult if we are impacted in this way. And I think some of us are probably burying our heads in the sand a little bit and pretending it's not going to happen. And we'll come back to that one when it happens. I know that at the moment I have to concentrate on my 2020 couples. There's still too many of them who need support. So yeah. Do you know if we can hold a wedding over 2 rooms, ceremony in one, and live feed of the ceremony in the other room, England weddings?
Ooh, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? I would say it comes down to what are the rules under cinema?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things here. One is it's a live streaming, so it's going to be a cinema. The second one is that you need to make sure everyone's socially distanced on that aspect. So it's only 2 households meeting indoors. It's those kind of things. Personally, for me, I am. Take your opinion of me as you will, but I am very much not about trying to find loopholes in this. I understand that's not really a loophole, that's actually probably something that's legit. I think it does come back to cinemas, which are obviously not happening at the moment, because I think they were included in the 1st of August one. So that's a bit tricky. I don't think so. I think it's a screening and it's not outdoors. So I think that would be a big loophole there.
And I think on the loopholes, it's worth just adding that we've noticed a real shift in the last few days, whereas at the beginning of last week, there was a lot of the chat was, if we do this, can we do that? And actually under this license, we'd be able to do this. And venues really managing quite successfully to sort of bend the rules to make things work for their couples. But what has now been happening, there's these local lockdowns. Everyone's going, well, hang on a minute, this might happen to us. and they are looking to name, shame and blame those that might be responsible. And what's really interesting is the number of emails and messages we've had from brides with weddings at the end of this year who are saying, my venue is letting people do X, Y, Z. I'm scared they're going to be shut down, and I can't have my wedding in October if they've been shut down. So your own brides will be starting to tell people that if you are doing something that they think might stop their wedding happening, it's that I think everyone is just so scared and so protecting themselves. So I think it is really, really worth being aware of that and just having an idea of that temperature that's going on in the forums. There's no reason sort of not to have a look and find out from couples what their perceptions are. We know it has been happening a little bit. We've seen some of the pictures appearing on social media, but there has been quite a lot of people going, should this be happening? Do you know this is happening? And we're not going to be the ones to tell anyone, clearly. We're there to try and help venues, but just be very aware of that sensitivity there, especially if you're in one of those areas where you're not far off a local lockdown. You don't want to be the ones being blamed.
I think there's actually 3 points on what you said, Alison. One is, if we're not seen as being the responsible sector that we are, we're never going to get government support. If they see us as being the super spreaders, if they see us as being irresponsible with their guidelines, we're not going to get their support. And I am hellbent on making sure we get that support. If anyone follows the What About Weddings campaign, you'll know that we are absolutely on our knees begging for that support. And we're doing a huge amount of media and press around that. If we are seen as breaking, bending, finding loopholes and not being responsible and not being the sensible industry that we are, and we've got this perception of being a fluffy sector, that, we're all about tiaras, and that's not the case. We've got serious businesses that make serious money for our economy. So that's one thing that I would really, implore that you do take those guidelines sensibly, and also remember they're there for the fact that we do have a pandemic going on, which lots of people around the world at the moment seem to be forgetting. The second thing is, and what I'd say to my venues that I consult with, is don't be that example venue. They're looking for you. They're looking for people to make an example out of and to come down heavy on. So please don't be that venue. Don't put yourself into any kind of jeopardy in that way. And also just checking that your insurance is still going to cover you for whatever it is you're doing. And the third thing is that, as Alison kind of indicated to you, the temperature of the couples is changing. So whereas before they were like, can anyone DM me if they're having a problem with their venue? It then went to, can anyone DM me if they're having a problem with this venue? And now it's like, right, I'm in this venue, who else has got this problem? And especially if you're in groups, if you're if they're in, I won't name any groups, but if you're in a group of hotels, they're on it. There are threads. I could name so many venues right now that couples have had issues with. Whether it's perceived as fair or not is another whole other issue. But I would just be careful. The reputational side of this is very much coming into the forefront of everything that we're doing. And I was speaking to Alison earlier, it's very much about revenue versus reputation now. So just be aware that this reputation that you're going to get through this pandemic and how you deal with it is going to last far, far longer than coronavirus, I hope. So yes, those are my 3 points on that one. Is just be wary. They're starting to talk, they're starting to name and shame, and they're not going to hold out.
Yeah, very, very well put. So we're a barn venue who only hold 12 weddings a year, still getting inquiries. Should we still continue to do viewings? Yes, if you're not in financial difficulty, absolutely you should be continuing to do viewings, book them in. Couples are wanting to plan for 2022, 2023. There are a few still planning and thinking about putting in late weddings this year, planning for next year. So absolutely, once those 12 spaces are filled, then I would say hold a waiting list. But yeah, do still keep doing what you do, because we will come out of this. We don't know how long it's going to take, and whether the news on Friday saying that this is as far as we can open up the country, we've reached our limits, suggests that this is where we are until we have a vaccine or an effective treatment. Or, I know this morning they were announcing much quicker testing, which would in fact, if it is rolled out on a larger level, could potentially be a solution for weddings. I know it's one of the things that's been discussed, but yeah, definitely keep your pipeline in for next year in the meantime.
And just touching on the cancellation point as well, Alison, if your couples are wanting to cancel, this is just my opinion, let them cancel, give them back the money. I very much go against some people think that the refund should include maintenance. I know that's a big issue right now because there's no case law around that, but limited and reasonable costs that they feel is fair, and use that time rather than fighting them to gain new business. I've got this much time for my husband right now, let alone for fighting a couple on a refund. And I know where I'd rather put my efforts. He does too. So, refund them and then move on. Get that new business in, get your 2022 clients in, and make sure that your books are looking for the future, and allow those couples to be let go, because for fighting, there's just too much going on in the world right now, I think.
Absolutely. And Historic Guildhall asking about whether the survey data is protected. So the individual responses, yes and no. We asked couples that were replying that if their venue or suppliers had been fantastic, and you may have seen a lot of us were on a We're Here campaign at the weekend, following on from What About Weddings. So We're Here was very much all about flooding social media on Saturday with positive stories from the industry, personal stories. And what we found a lot of our couples were doing is they were saying, my venue was here for me, and all of my suppliers, they helped me, they postponed, and they named them and tagged them. And that was all over the internet, which was great. It blocked out any messages from people going, this is awful and this is what's happened. But from the point of view of sharing the data, all of those positive ones, yes, we're going to be putting it out there. Our team are already getting them out there every day at the moment on Instagram. We're naming different venues whose brides have given them a shout out. And tagging the venues in. For those that we also had a list on there as if couples have had a problem, we would rather they were telling us than putting it on the internet. Wherever we notice a pattern, we do get in touch with those venues. If it's just one or two, we tend to not do an awful lot. If they actively contact us and say, help, I just can't progress with this, we would rather contact you. So we will let you know if anyone is saying anything to us and you need to know about it. Absolutely promise you that will be passed on to you. We try to stop it here rather than letting it get on social media.
And I think there's also, that goes back down to another question someone's asked about, what about weddings campaign and what is that? Which was part of the We're Here over the weekend. So basically, the group of us of individuals who decided that we couldn't be silent any longer. And we started the campaign, What About Weddings? So if you look on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at the hashtag What About Weddings, you will see that it has gained a huge amount of traction, which we're so proud of. And really, we wanted to give out some clear messages to the government, but with every message that we've put out, we've made sure that couples can get behind it as well as individual businesses and venues. So our three messages are clarity. We need some sort of roadmap. With that roadmap, we're not looking for numbers, we're not looking for our rates, we're just asking them, please can you give us a date as to which point you're going to next review weddings. Now they've simply done that with the 15th of August, but actually we want something further for September, October, November brides and grooms who we know are getting edgy now. So if they knew that the next time that this 30-person reception was going, was going to be reviewed, then that would help with their mental health and us as businesses. You would know whether to bring your staff back off of furlough, all of those kind of things. So the clarity point is our first one. The second one is parity. We really do want parity. We want parity because at the moment, the ceremony guidelines actually really do heavily restrict cultural ceremonies and faith ceremonies. We're finding that Jewish people, Asian people, anyone whose actual religious ceremony means more to them and allows them to move on to the next stage of their life is very much restricted, because it has to follow the social distancing guidelines, which is 2 households. So it's terrible. So we really want parity. And the final one is choice. We want to be able to give our couples choice, and in order to do that, we need financial support. So we have, through the NAWP, put together suggestions that were brought forward from the Love My Dress supplier Facebook group, which has over 5,300 members in it. And those suggestions were given to the Treasury as ideas as to what can happen that supports the whole industry. So as Alison has touched on with her surveys, from a supplier point of view, I don't want another loan, but I quite like a grant, thank you very much, because loans aren't going to help me. But obviously from a venue point of view, that and everything else would really help you. So by having that financial support to get us to the other side, we're then able to give our couples the choice that they deserve, which will in turn, help us all. So they're the 3 key aspects that we're working on at the moment with the What About Weddings campaign. And each week we don't have this massive plan, guys. We're just, in this the same as you are. But each week we seem to bring out a new message that resonates both with couples and businesses. So at the weekend we did the We're Here one, because we wanted to make sure that we were seen, we have a voice. I'm so pleased to say that the hashtag was trending on Twitter, which was amazing, and everyone could get behind that message, and it's not too late. So please do have a look on my Instagram if you want to copy, or Alison has the details, and we can definitely keep that message going. It seems to be really working very, very well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Nina. You've been absolutely brilliant keeping that going, and I know how much work is going into it. So that's really, really, really helpful to all of us. And a few other questions that are coming up. Bridget asking about what is and isn't allowed from the point of view of after the reception. The government have basically given quite wide guidance on this. They have very simply said that it shouldn't be a reception. So whatever forms a reception. So if they're coming for that, I mean, I guess you could almost look at it like if you go to church on a Sunday, you go for the service and you leave, and that's it. So a reception would be staying for drinks and canapes. It would be all then booking into the same restaurant afterwards. It would be, all going back to somebody's garden after, anything like that is very much what the government's saying. The whole idea behind this was that there are couples that legally need to get married for immigration reasons, for different legal rights reasons, military families, and so on. And this is why, when we were pushing and saying we need the right to be able to marry again, but of course, couples understandably, and I think all of us just want weddings to be back, and weddings as in the whole thing, and it will just snowball, as soon as there was that, okay, you can have a sit down meal, because it started off, no, it was just the ceremony. And so we all said, well, why, pubs and restaurants are open, why can't we go to a pub and restaurant and just sit down with our guests? So they said, okay, yes, you can do that. Then immediately everyone was saying, well, if we can just sit down with our guests, what's the difference if we do a cake cutting and do some speeches? Who's that going to? And so it snowballs. So I think that's why they've said nothing that constitutes a reception is there in the guidance. It should just be the marriage bit. Deborah, I agree entirely. When you've got celebrities, the royal family, it's not helpful. That was so not helpful. But I think it will come out. It's going to become more and more apparent, as I said. That mood is there, that people, if your couples can't get married, they are going to be very, very quick to criticize anyone else that is being allowed to, and be saying, hang on, look what's happening here. Why is that being allowed? Ginny was asking about dates, that where is there going to be the space? One of the things we have been able to do, and Nina and Love My Dress and many others, is try to steer the couple's perception of what happens with weddings. They look at media platforms in order, when they're first planning their wedding, to go, what's a wedding like? What should we expect? What should we plan? And it's surprisingly easy to steer them in a different direction when needed. It's incredibly easy to do that. So all that is needed is making sure that all of us are saying, this is the reason to get married on a weekday. This is what's great about weekdays. At the moment, it's about 60-70% of this year's weddings have moved to 2021. So if you were booked every single Saturday in 2021, it's still only every single Saturday and 3/4 of Fridays or Sundays that you'll be booked. There's lots more dates. There's also really helpful things like the government changing the employment rules to mean that you can carry over leave to next year. So, you know, people have got that leave. They're going to have that excuse that they don't have to have all of the children at the wedding that they didn't want, because, you know, it's now a weekday wedding. There's going to be, you know, we will get creative at encouraging people that, you know, the best thing since sliced bread is a Monday wedding if it's a conference venue. And if you're not a conference venue, then, you know, Wednesdays and Thursdays are a great day to have a wedding and split the week. So, you know, we can certainly do what we can to help with that.
I'm definitely pushing that message hard in Plan to Postpone. I'm actually sick of repeating myself, and and they're getting it. They get it. They understand that there's a limit and there's only so many days in the year. The only issue is when it comes up, and I'm sure some of you have seen this, is when they have done dummy inquiries and they find out that actually you have got dates available for next year, but you're keeping them for new business. That's when the issues come in. If they genuinely know that you don't have any availability on keep dates for next year, then fine. They've got no issue with a Monday wedding. I've got my whole of June, July, August, coming up to May now, is taken up with Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday weddings. Can't wait. Burnout's going to be really fun. But if they do feel that actually you're holding on to those dates to get new business, they don't feel looked after. And that's when the problems then start coming in. That's when they feel like all you're interested in is money. That's when the relationship starts to sour. So that's why making sure your postponement policy gives them the options is really key. So for example, if you have a free postponement up until March, and then you have a small charge for a peak date next year, but then they've got to cover the difference in the venue hire if it's 2022, or something along those lines. And those peak dates into next year can include Mondays and Tuesdays, because you could sell them to new bookings. But it's just making sure they feel in control, that they feel that they've got the options that they deserve. That's where really you'll be onto a winner.
A couple of questions on third-party suppliers. Decor teams presumably are going in before the weddings. That's fine. They wouldn't be counted in the numbers as third-party suppliers. I'm guessing that's what the question is. Would the couple be allowed photos after the ceremony? That seems to be totally accepted as being okay. They need to be socially distant. You can't have the group photo. Seems to be okay, but that's going to come down to local authorities. They may feel that that is forming part of the wedding. And I would say that's one of those grey areas that everyone would say, well, you know, as long as they are very, very careful that they are socially distant photos, that nobody photoshops them to make it look like a group photo that might get the venue in trouble. But we have seen over the last couple of days advice from EHOs, so the local authorities' environmental health officers, that clearly go absolutely against the government guidance. Clearly, it's how they have decided to interpret it. So just bear it in mind. Take all of the information that's out there into consideration before making a decision. You know, with something like a photographer, if the local authority says it's fine and it seems common sense and it seems right, then, you know, absolutely. But if it's something that you know is on the guidance, even if the local authorities say, no, that's fine, it may be they've not read the guidance. I mean, we had, you know, things happening last month, way before receptions were allowed to take place, with local authorities saying, no, that's fine, you can have 50 for a wedding reception. No, you can't. You know, where are you getting this from? They're going, oh, it's just guidance. Yeah, but that's the perception of, you know, you've got to think about public perception on this as well. Any other questions on here? I think that is probably about, sorry, James.
Free Saturdays, then how would you divide it up between 45 couples when it's postponed?
Oh yeah, that's a very tricky one. I know sorting out the priority of couples early on caused a lot of angst. So this is back in March and April. Couples were trying to get through to their venues when, you know, most of the staff had been furloughed, and they were getting very frustrated, and they were then contacting us and they were saying, I'm trying to get through to my venue because I know how busy they are. I know they have 120 weddings a year, and I want to make sure I get a Saturday. And that was all brides wanted to get a Saturday. They wanted to be top of the list. This needs to be down to your own venue to sort out your policy. I mean, it's that hideous tightrope that I would hate to be walking in any of your shoes with, you know, that reputation versus revenue. And I think it's just trying to make it as attractive as possible to everyone. We know from the survey that if you do only have a few Saturdays, then you could charge 15% more, and most people would be perfectly happy. Most people would understand that. More than 15%, we know that they would find that unusual because of what other venues are offering. So bear that data in mind. But I would say brides are, because it's only quite recent that they've been talking to other brides from the same venue, they've been talking up until then just generally to brides. They're not comparing their situation to others from the venue. And a lot of the issues, when we have spoken to venues, when a complaint's come to us, we've then called the venue and said, you know, is there anything we can do to help? Very often it's been, well, if I do this for this couple, I'll have to do it for all of the other couples. Not necessarily if they're not speaking to each other. You know, if it's the right thing to do for that couple because of really unusual situation, then, you know, you can justify that to your other couples. You know, we only had this number of Saturdays. We had to make a choice. This is how we did it. We didn't do it on the person that shouted loudest. We did it on, you know, the person that was earliest to book, or the person whose date most closely matches that, or whatever criteria. As long as you can be transparent and say, this is how we did it, I think people will understand. You know, it is a really, really hard. All of them want to have that perfect date. And I particularly sympathise because I had no idea how many teachers there were out there till there was a shortage of Saturdays. And all of a sudden, everyone that was phoning was going, I'm a teacher, therefore it's got to be a Saturday. So, but the school holidays.
Yeah, I think there's actually 2 points on that. James, you have to do exactly what's right for you. I can give you examples from venues I've worked with, but every single venue works differently. Everyone has their own requirements. Everyone has their own bank balance. So you have to absolutely do what's right for you. So please don't take anything that I've said as what should be done. Absolutely not. I just give you examples. And it sounds like you dealt with it in the best way for you, and that's amazing. The second thing is totally just gone out of my head. So forget that. It's about couples.
I think that's a really, really good note. It very much brings us full circle to where we started. This isn't about saying this is how to do it, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. This is just giving you an opportunity to see a different set of data, a new set of data that it has only just become available, so that you have that little bit more information that helps you tread that hideous tightrope and try to help your couples in the best way you can. So I think with that, thank you ever so much indeed. If anyone has any questions at all, then hopefully you've got my email address and I can put you in touch with Nina. But otherwise, she is very, very easy to find on Instagram, on Facebook, through Occasion Queen, and so on, and on Plan to Propose. So thanks very much indeed, everyone. Good luck. Please don't hesitate to email if there's anything else at all that we can help with. We are here. We are behind you. You know, we'll do what we can to support you in any and every way we can at such an incredibly difficult time. But keep fighting. We're there with you. Thanks very much.